Hi, folks. This is Dr. Kat Schreier, your host for The Water Show and founder of Water Citizen Media Foundation. And we are here covering the great, interesting people at the Water Summit in Milwaukee from the Water Council. And this is one of our speakers, again, fresh from the stage. You're getting a great synopsis. And we did record some of the what she was talking about on stage with George Hawkins and author Charles Fishman. But SAWS has always been so. Well, I'll let you go ahead and say hello.
Hi.
So Director of Conservation for San Antonio Water Supply, and it's actually an area that I have gotten to know over the years because I had considered my PhD was at Colorado State, but my other option was University of Texas. And looking at sort of the integrated planning that has occurred around groundwater, this is my background, groundwater and aquifer storage and related to habitat. And, so we were looking at the lower South Platte up in Colorado. And
can't go wrong. Colorado, Texas, both great places.
Both great places. But talking about blind salamanders.
Yeah.
And I say I've seen more blind salamanders and blind salamanders have seen me. But that's a big part of the story of San Antonio water is what happened with.
I've sometimes said that I have a job because of the Endangered Species Act, which is people kind of look at you, really? And that is true. San Antonio came to its realization that we needed to have a water management plan because our aquifer feed springs, which are home to endangered species, and I have joked that they're not like the most charismatic creatures in the world because it's
fluffy panda bears.
We're talking about a beetle, a blind salamander, and a snail darter. So they're not cute and cuddly.
A beetle, a blind salamander, and a snail darter went into a bar.
Right, went into a bar. It's the start of some kind of joke. They went into the springs, and what happened? So these springs require us to keep our aquifer 95% full. At all times. We only have access to a small portion of this wonderful aquifer that is the Edwards Aquifer that we sit right on top of. So water management became critical to San Antonio in the mid 1990s when that came to the forefront through a lawsuit, frankly.
And like I said, we captured some of the discussion on that earlier, but there's really been a shift in the role of conservation as a management tool. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, one of the unique things that San Antonio leaders did many years before I had the good fortune to move to San Antonio was interpret water conservation as a supply. To say that the water we save and that we do not use in the future is going to be water we can use to grow as a community.
Right.
And so I am held accountable to firm water savings to acquire supply that is part of our future water sales portfolio in the same way that a pipeline project that brings in new acre feet of water is a new water supply. So I was talking to you before we started about this, that we interact with a lot of the public, and you could think that it's a PR effort because generally it's popular. Generally people like it.
How conservation was treated. It's like,
it's a feel-good thing.
To put a brick in their toilet,
or
and you can save this much water.
Turn off the water when you brush your teeth. That's a good thing.
Denver waters brush every other teeth.
Brush every other tooth. It's cute.
Yeah.
It's cute, and I admire the very cute messaging that Denver Water does, by the way. But in my boss is the head of water resources at SAWS. So I am held accountable as a water resource. And so although it's great that we make people happy and that they enjoy our programs, I have to show through metrics and evaluation that those programs actually did realize permanent water savings.
Right.
And so that's a unique way to view water conservation that is becoming less and less uncommon, that's becoming the way others are viewing it as well.
Now, people talk about, why would we tell people to save water and use less of our product? We sell water, that's our job.
Yeah.
But, you compare the amount of income, revenue that comes in for the water versus the cost of having to expand a plant. Yeah. I mean, it's really, you got to look at your net revenue there. And so when you're talking about conservation, it's also looking at what are the capital expenditures that you don't have to make by not having to do expansions.
Right. So there's a bunch of different business cases to make. One of them is what you just said. What is the cost fundamentally of your new water supplies, and what's the capitalized cost of that over time versus the cost to save the water? So you can make that business case. There are other ones too, in that peak is very expensive for utilities. All utilities have to design their entire system to that peak day that everybody wants to turn on their sprinkler system and turn on their faucets and everything all at once. So peak is a big deal in the utility industry.
What's your peak day?
Well, I'm sorry?
4th of July or
it actually tends to be a little, sometime in July, late July tends to be our peak day, but it's variable. Now, water conservation and drought management has really changed our peak over the years. When we are in drought management and we have to rein in that peak because of drought management, small changes in behavior by our customers can drop the consumption by 50 million gallons a day.
Yeah.
And that's an enormous difference in water that you're having to pump and produce, much less stress on the system when it's extremely hot and dry, and the energy.
Right.
And so the business case goes beyond just comparing us to a new supply.
Right.
It also becomes, if you've done proactive long-term conservation, then you get into these drought periods, which climate change experts tell us are sadly going to become more intermittent and more severe. Then the case to your customers is really not that big a deal.
Yeah.
To say we need to manage this peak and we need to get through this. It becomes managing through and not a crisis.
How has climate change discussions, climate conversations shifted the acceptance level of, when people talk about, things, it gets pretty hot in San Antonio.
It's always been hot.
People can see, the additional stresses for, additional air conditioning, for additional, energy demands for cooling, as well as for the water that people need for their homes, for sprinkler systems,
well, it's an awkward conversation in Texas where not everybody who's an elected official in Texas wants to talk about climate change. And so my comment to people is, I don't really need to prove to you that climate change is real. I just need to say, let's talk about the last 10 years. In the last 10 years in San Antonio, we've had wild swings from very wet periods like we just had nearly record-breaking rain in the last 3 months. And preceding that, we had 4 years of drought, and 2011 being one of the worst, hottest, driest periods that we've ever experienced on record. And so these wild fluctuations are here. Now, we can debate why, but they're here, and we're having to deal with them. And so we need to be ready for resiliency. And, we do a drought of record planning in Texas, where we say the 1950 7-year drought was our drought of record. Prior to this 4-year drought, some people kind of talked like that was a little excessive. Like, whatever, what's the odds of us ever going into a 1950s drought again? Well, that last 4 years, starting with 2011, was remarkably like the 1950s drought. And yet it wasn't a crisis because of all of the planning that went into the last 20 years.
Yeah. We talked about droughts or crisis as an opportunity. Never
let a good crisis go to waste.
Thank you. And just this idea of how to capitalize on it through communication, through strategic communication. And that communication for water professionals is not just about mass media and who's going to talk to the press during the crisis. It's you getting out there and talking to your commercial customers, to your residential customers, to public meetings, to boards, to whoever. In being able to have so many resources for those communications, that you've got studies behind it. Conservation has become so much more sophisticated than it was 20 years ago in terms of what you can bring to a conversation. What you talked about a example with a commercial client that was getting a big fine. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, we have we work a lot with all of our customers. If you use water in San Antonio, we probably have a conservation program aimed at you to work with you. And we use 3 things to save water: education and outreach, effective incentives, and reasonable regulation. And those 3 things feed into each other.
And the incentives, you actually have to tell someone about those incentives.
So the 3 things, if we don't talk to you and we don't educate you and we don't get you to care about water, then you're not going to care about the regulation or the incentive. So that's sort of the base of everything, is a lot of relationships in the community with our different kinds of customers.
Right. And you told me it's not just a 10-second soundbite. Things like this, being able to have a longer conversation.
It's a sophisticated conversation. And one of the most fascinating things that we're doing more and more of is market segmentation. and recognizing that there is no one message. We are a very diverse community. We serve 1.7 million people, 500,000 metered customers in the San Antonio water system. That is very different groups of people. And so one of my mantras is the right program for the right customer. So we spend a lot of time analyzing who's using the water, how do they use it, what are their needs, and what's the pitch that works with them, frankly. So I no longer think that if you came to the SAWS website and you looked up conservation, you would get a limited view of what we actually do in my department, because that's just one portal. A lot of what we do is now directly reaching out to the Car Wash Association or the Plumbing Association, or the Builders Association, or particular neighborhood groups. I don't rely on just passively put something on the web and think they're going to come to us. It is now, how do we reach out to that group in a way that's comfortable for them? Build a relationship
as well as to attract them, and that's actually been a big part of what we're looking to do with Water System Media Foundation, is figure out better ways of communication and connection, primarily using new media. So when people talk about market segmentation, we talk about list segmentation. We talk about figuring out,
customer relation management and how do you find people?
How much do people use their emails? And
it's a fascinating thing to delve into the research of this. And people have said to me, we're doing a project where we do direct mail for certain things. And I've had people say, well, just get their emails and send it to them. My comment is, well, actually, if you don't expect that email from me and you're not anticipating it, you're not going to open it.
Well,
so it's not so simple as just get their email and spam them.
Absolutely. No,
it is not that.
But things like having a lead magnet, having some kind of
now having an e-newsletter that they want and they signed up for,
or an online course. You talked about all your training programs, which was really cool, and because we've been working on ways to take those hands-on types of courses and put those into video and put them in live interactive where you can have some Q&A versus trying to find a venue, trying to find, deal with all the logistics of getting people to show up when there are people who would love to do it if they could get there, So tell us about the training programs and things like that.
Well, we do a variety of things. We actually, one of the more innovative things that we've done for over 10 years at SAWS is we actually have formal partnerships with community education groups, nonprofits. So we just signed 7 nonprofit organizations to the tune of up to $500,000 a year that they can earn on performance contracts for helping us educate the community on water conservation. So this is groups like the Bexar County Master Gardeners, the groups that do land protection, the Botanical Society, the Mitchell Lake Audubon, and their mission overlaps with us. So we have an understanding where you do education, and we've agreed to it ahead of time. You co-brand with us, and then people get the education. You get a performance payment based on the outcome from that.
So you are paying the nonprofits who are helping to deliver these.
That is exactly
so
right.
They're covering their costs, and
so they get to support their organization, and we encourage them on that part of the mission that overlaps with ours. So that's one way that we get our face-to-face contacts up. We have a site, Garden Style SA, that is about all things gardening San Antonio. We have an e-newsletter that goes to about 13,000 subscribers at this point. We have a Periscope that goes out at 10:30 every Thursday, a live Periscope feed that's on different subjects.
So Periscope is another way of doing a live stream. We're on a Hangout now. There's Periscope, there's
Hangout,
there's Facebook
all
Live.
kinds of different ones.
So it's just getting to know your different platforms.
An experiment we did recently is we wanted to do a water saver landscape tour in a high-end neighborhood where we were going to have to bus people in and out of a gated community, very wealthy community that thankfully invited us in to let us do this. We knew we could only get so many people in and out, and it was going to take busing them in a tight schedule. So we said, okay, you're going to need a ticket. You're going to need to sign up for an electronic ticket to have a seat on the bus. We sold out. We only advertised this through social media, Facebook and other things, where we have our networks going and our e-newsletter. We sold out of tickets to get 900 people into the neighborhood over a half day. And I had people anxiously showing up the day of the event at the parking lot saying, I don't have a ticket. And I was like, okay, think Southwest Airlines or whatever. You know, if you are a ticketed passenger for the 10 a.m. boarding time, you're lined up here. This is the standby line.
Nice.
So social media led to standby
Absolutely.
seating for a conservation event that was free.
That's fabulous.
To have them tour through and see, you know, $1 million homes that have
Right.
gorgeous water saver landscapes.
And again, recognizing that ties into there's a business case for these tours
Right.
that you can
And
tie that
the
straight
business
back
case
to
is
conservation.
that if people see that this is $1 million house that put in this gorgeous landscape, it's obviously the in thing.
Right.
And then we placed volunteers, master gardeners, and folks all over all those yards to explain it to people while they went through. So yes, there's a business case for it, but it is a fascinating thing to now try to market. That particular program was aimed at a segment of our customers that live in a certain kind of house and have a certain kind of yard. And by working social media angles, we could very much focus marketing that program to the people who need that one.
You know, it's funny. Another thing we were talking about before we got started was the value, both the business case for tours and the value of tours as actual hydrotourism.
Yeah.
And that's something that we would be really excited to look at, because we actually, this is from, I don't know if you can see this, 2010, the last time we're about
bike tour, which I think is really cool.
Tour.
We're into biking in San Antonio. We got a lot of bike lanes and we got a B-cycle program. So a hydro bike tour. We haven't put those two things together, but that is
on your phone.
So San Antonio.
Exactly. So we started actually doing this through water conferences.
Yeah.
It is a combination, me and this guy named Matt Frank, who was he's a finance guy in New York City who also happens to be a water history buff and a cyclist. So he would do, with the local bike club, he would do these tours of the Washington Aqueduct. So historic old aqueduct, and, you know, Central Park and all this stuff. And so we came up with this idea of a joint poster, which we can post on our site and everything, so you can see this poster that we did at AWWA back in 2010. Yeah. Of looking at tours and the value of tours at things like Orange County when they did potable reuse, where public acceptance and not just broad public, but the doctors and the surfers and everybody would go through their tour. Same thing at Fairfax, how important tours were to being able to do the kinds of things that you enjoy, the revolutionary kinds of things. You got to get that in there. So a tour is a great resource to do that. And then, you know, Matt actually did a little financial analysis of if you do a bond referendum and people do tours and it costs you this much to do a tour, but you make that much money off the bond. I mean,
it's in there. One of the things we do that I love the bike concept. So I'm gonna steal that and take it back home and talk to people about
a kleptocrat.
Kleptocrat is what George Hawkins called it. We do something called Rain to Drain. Yes. That our education folks have put together, and people start at the recharge zone and they see a really cool recharge feature and they hear all of the importance of the recharge of our aquifer, and they go to a pumping production facility, and then they go down to our Dos Rios Recycling Center and they see the sewage treatment and the purple pipe system starting, and they see the aquifer storage and recovery, and then they hear about all of why this is an environmental center. Why the all of it is an environmental effort, from protecting the recharge to cleaning the sewage to the integrated pest management that we use to make sure there's not a bad smell or flies at the sewage treatment center. And there's a waiting list. This is a very popular happening tour in San Antonio.
Well, and one of the things we want to do to bring it to the water citizen with people passionate about water is one of the advantages of all the green infrastructure and that sort of thing is that there are things that you can see without having to go behind a gate, without going into a facility, and that we can actually, you know, create. We actually talked to the folks at GIS, ArcGIS, and they've shown us how to use the system that they have, where you can have a map and you click on the map and you pull up an image and a little description, and we can even link it to a video and have someone from from SAWS talk about, here we're doing this, and how that. Really just puts that tour in your hands, so that if you've got like Charles was talking about, Charles Fishman, the author, Big Thirst, was talking about his first exposure to SAWS was when he had some time to kill before a flight. He called him up.
So of course he goes to the sewage treatment plant because he's got an
treatment.
afternoon in San Antonio. I love that.
Great,
You know, that's
great,
a great.
yeah, great
that's a
tour,
great-
by the way, if you ever get down there. But of course, there's you know, long wait list for.
But you know, if you call us in advance, we'll try to work it out. If you call SAWS,
exactly. So what are, you know, to identify those things, you know, and I did a lot of GIS stuff in grad school and everything. So just to identify those cool things, what are the cool, sexy things going on in water that you guys are doing? How can we put that on a map? How can we turn that into a tour of different lengths for different time periods? If it's a walking tour, if it's a bike tour. We actually did a number of tours with the civil engineering department, the chairman, Ed Bauer, and he helped us recruit a group of students to do an independent study project that we worked with them on planning out a tour. We looked at health and safety planning. We looked at transportation. We looked at where you could actually have someone stand and talk and not have, you know, a highway going over the top, and, you know, have access and all those things, so that people who are flying in to do water conferences and they're sitting, you know, hearing at the stage about cool things that city is doing, but they're not actually seeing it.
Yeah.
When often there are a lot of really cool things right in the area where these conference hotels are located. So it can be one of your best ways of getting the information out is, you know, next time you have a break, you know, between breakout sessions or whatever, go do one of these tours, either with a guide or, you know, ultimately we want to be able to put this
it
in the
on
hands
phone so you can be self-guided.
You can self-guided when you have some time.
Yeah.
To be able to do that. I think it's going to be a brilliant way to contribute to water knowledge, make it experiential, put it in people's hands and pedals and everything else. So cool. But well, you guys have always been tremendous in terms of your outreach and your educational efforts and creativity. And
I'm lucky to work with such a creative team. The people at SAWS always amaze me.
Absolutely. Well, it's a great bunch, and we really appreciate your being here. If you're watching this anywhere other than thewatershow.org, go ahead and head on over there, and be sure to subscribe to Water Citizen News for the updates so that we can tell you if we move this to another place. Because next week we're going to be at AWWA, and they're going to be at watershow.org. Be able to type into the comments below, put in your questions. We'll follow up. Things to download. Videos of our sponsors like Neptune, who you got to talk to outside. Great sponsor. Thank you very much for being here.
Thanks.
Appreciate this. And we'll see you on The Water Show.